when it comes to that muscle piece, to me, it sounds like there's two different areas that we want to understand when it comes to that. One is using our muscles to burn up energy within them. And then two is to, over time, put on muscle mass to become more metabolically healthy and have more volume there as a storage mechanism. Do I have that right?
That's my school of thought. That's the way that I think about it. And I think that's important, Jesse, too. And as we talk about, I want to get into some more details there, but the thing that's going against us, especially if we're living life blind and drinking soda and having just sandwiches and French fries and not moving, is as our metabolism falls into this so-called insulin resistant or metabolically dysfunctional category, we naturally become more catabolic. Our muscle becomes compromised. And part of that is because our baseline level of inflammation tends to increase. And one of the earliest inflammatory cytokines that we now recognize to be elevated in people who are insulin resistant or overweight or have autoimmunity is called TNF alpha. It turns out that TNF alpha used to be called cachectin because it was responsible for inducing cachexia. So when you are inflamed, you're in a state of cachexia, which translates into breaking down muscle tissue, along with other tissues in the body, bone as well. And so it's even more important for people who have insulin resistance or a little bit of obesity, some excess body fat and so forth, to be much more intentional about the amount of protein they eat, but also resistance training, because their body is naturally prone to start to break down both their bone and their muscle tissue. And they're more susceptible to gaining body fat. It's like this triad: increase fat gain, reduce bone mass, bone mineral density, and reduce muscle tissue. And so this is why we see so much chronic disease. You know, when you go to the doctors, if you ever have to go to a hospital, right, you see elderly people oftentimes with enlarged abdomens, you know, belly fat, not enough strength, and weak bones. And then that leads to disability and really reduced quality of life. And many of these people, they need caregivers to help them go to the bathroom, to feed themselves and so forth. They're so weak. And that's what we want to avoid. And so by supporting, as you mentioned, but by way of hypertrophy and resistance training, doing compound movements instead of isolated exercises. There's nothing wrong with a bicep curl or a hamstring extension or hamstring curl, leg extension. But when you do a compound movement like a squat, you activate over 200 muscles in your body. I mean, this is what research actually shows. When you do things like a pull-up, you know, and a compound movement is moving two or more joints at the same time. So really simple. When you go to the gym, you're like, okay, I don't know what to do. Do I do the bicep curl, the tricep extension, leg extension? Just focus on moving two or more joints at the same time. And that is called a compound movement. So, you know, instead of the bicep curl, you're doing a pull-up. Instead of the tricep extension, you're doing a push-up. You're doing a press, bench press, incline press. It could be barbell, it can be dumbbell, it can be a machine, but you want to be moving multiple joints at the same time. And that's going to help with bone mineral density, but also support the health of the muscle, like we've been talking about, signaling the muscle to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And I mean, this also gets back to fasting. You know, many people talk about, well, I do this 36-hour fast, or I only eat every other day. Fasting is great. I've been doing fasting for a long time. Tons of research on that. Jason Fung has really helped us better understand the importance of fasting. But if you exercise, you don't need to fast as much. The first modality that, and actually there's more research supporting exercise as a tool to enhance what everyone is trying to achieve with fasting, known as the process of autophagy. Exercise is the best autophagy tool that we have. It's more powerful than fasting. And I can say that with confidence based upon human clinical studies where they randomize people based upon their baseline VO2 max. Your VO2 max is a great assessment of your overall fitness level. So they age-matched groups based upon VO2 max. Low VO2 max people were more sedentary. They're a little bit more overweight in this study compared to high VO2 max people. They fasted both arms of the study, low VO2 max, more sedentary people versus high VO2 max, more fit people, to fast for 36 hours. Every 8 hours, they did a biopsy in their muscle tissue to look at autophagy enhancement. It took a full 36 hours for the low VO2 max, the unfit people, to get the same degree of autophagy initiation that the fit people got in just 12 hours of fasting. So if you're like one of these people that's really into fasting right now. Some people kind of discover fasting along with keto, and all that is great. But when you exercise, you make your fasting machinery much more efficient. And so then when you pair the two together, if you exercise and do fasting, or use a fasted exercise session to accelerate your fast, I mean, that's even better. And so it turns out that there's so much carryover and crossover when it comes to exercise as a tool to enhance all the different things that we've really been talking about here. So I think this is important because when we hear about muscle, you mentioned having bigger, healthier, stronger muscles. I mean, I think most people conjure up aesthetic images and they need to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that. And that's not what it's about. Muscle is an organ just like your thyroid, just like your pancreas, just like your brain. It's a metabolically active organ. But unlike your thyroid or your pancreas, you don't need to consciously think about releasing thyroxine from your thyroid. You don't need to think about releasing glucagon or insulin from your pancreas does that based upon how, the time of the day for your thyroid. You get up in the morning, you're going to have more free thyroid compared to later in the day, for example. Same with men and their testosterone. It just naturally happens early in the morning. You release testosterone. Your muscles are an organ and they release at least 26 different myokines and exerkines and signaling molecules. But this organ is only primed if we move it. That's an important point. So your muscle is a health promoting organ, releasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor that helps your brain form new memories and enhances memory consolidation. Your muscles release these little spherical compounds that help to signal your fat cells to start to break down and release stored fat, right? But these things only happen if we move our muscles. And getting back to what you're saying with resistance training, not only will you help your muscles become bigger and help shift the balance to a more anabolic state versus being in a more catabolic state, but you can also reduce inflammatory signaling molecules. Your muscles actually release specific myokines that prevent cancer. Right. But again, this only happens. Einstein once was famous for saying, nothing happens until something moves. Nothing happens in your muscle until you move it, you prime it. So I think that's a good way to reframe going to the gym instead of thinking, oh, I got to burn calories or, oh, I got to lift weights. Yeah, you're priming this organ that's going to release a litany of signaling molecules that will help your brain, reduce cancer, make you feel better. I mean, most importantly, I think the best thing associated with exercise is it just makes your mood so much better, right? And then you make better health decisions. I remember a study I was reading about college students where they wanted to see what effect exercise would have on just discretionary calorie intake and overall diet quality. And they tracked these people and they just randomized one group to exercise in a structured format. It's like 4 days a week, going to the gym for 45 minutes. They gave them some rudimentary exercises to start doing and then had a control group and didn't tell them to change their fitness levels. And they also looked at diet diaries and how these people, and so there can be some quality differences, and stuff in this type of study. But I think they had enough people in the two groups to come to some interesting conclusions. They found that the people who exercised had less processed foods, less sugar sweetened beverages, less discretionary food items like baked goods, cookies, crackers, and so forth. They naturally just ate better because they were exercising. So this is one of these sort of keystone habits that can have so much carryover because we've all worked with clients that are like, when I get home, I just have to have ice cream, or I have to hit the Carl's Jr. on my way home from work. If it's been a bad day, my body just drives the car there. Like I can't control it. Well, if you went to the gym beforehand, you would be much less likely to hit up Carl's Jr. or to wolf down that pint of ice cream, right? Because you're like, look, I went to the gym. I'm the type of person that exercises, and people who exercise don't binge on French fries from Carl's Jr., right? We have a protein shake or we have a steak or whatever. So that's the cool thing about this is it has carryover directly, but indirectly in other decisions that are linked with health promoting behavioral change in our life.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying and agree with you overall. There would probably be a small percentage of people that would feel like I've earned this. I can go home and have the ice cream after going to the gym. Just to be fair, there would be those people as well.
Well, okay. And I happen to be one of those people. And so that, the cool thing is the more fit you are, the more buffer room you have to afford to not eat like a zealot all the time. I mean, that's the cool part is like, if you go for your walk, you go for your run and you lift weights, or you go for a 28-mile hike or something like I do all the time on the weekends in the summer, you can have your ice cream, you can have your cookies. I just did my DEXA. My body fat percentage hasn't changed since 2018. I've built muscle, have a slightly more body fat in general, but my percentage based upon the amount of muscle that I have is the same. And so it's 12.7% body fat. Now, I don't track calories, don't do anything. We have ice cream. We have sourdough pancakes with maple syrup on it. Like, not super strict on the diet front, but it hasn't, I'm not paying the price for it, so to speak, if you will. So because, recreational activity is just part of like part of my being, and so you have more flexibility. And that's what I like to get people to get to that state where they don't have to track that's not a good way to live, as you know, Jesse, where you're tracking every macro. Oh, I can't go out to dinner because, they're not going to eat the food that I want, and become antisocial and all these things. Like, when you become more fit this way, you have so much more buffer room, and your metabolic health is not going to be compromised as a consequence of that. Now, is that ideal? Is that optimal? I'm not sure, but I have a young child and like to, just sort of not be super strict all the time. And if she has a great track meet, it's like, hey, let's go get ice cream, and not feel guilty about it. It's like, hey, we're going to walk later. You know that, right? She's like, yeah, cool. So enjoy a little ice cream, go for a walk. Like, there's that trade-off.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
The thing that's going against us, especially if we're living life blind and drinking soda and having just sandwiches and French fries and not moving, is as our metabolism falls into this so-called insulin resistant or metabolically dysfunctional category, we naturally become more catabolic. Our muscle becomes compromised. And part of that is because